They think you were the cutest thing. Are you the cutest thing? Hello, BookTube. And welcome to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall. It's now requisite that you get a close-up look at the bean. She makes an appearance in the Daily Penguin. Sometimes she's feeling more cuddly than others. Usually, hello baby. Usually because of the timing of these videos, she is eager to go outside. So she just wants me to stop talking. Just stop talking, huh? We will go on a nice walk, even though it's freezing cold outside here in Boston. We will still go on a nice walk until we are frozen solid, until we can't take it anymore. But we have been doing these penguins just one book at a time. It's been a great deal of fun. I at the end of last year, I realized I wasn't going to have time to do a normal shelf tour of these this whole penguin wall that I've made over the course of the time that I've been on BookTube. If you look at my earliest videos, which I am doing for an ill-advised retrospective series, you can see that those shelves gradually fill with penguins, where once upon a time they weren't. I'd originally thought to include them as sort of the big finale to a 2019 library tour, but then I ran out of time. And I also thought, well, what if we were to do more of a spotlight on penguins? And I confess, in my mind, I thought, oh, that sounds like so much fun. And then the other part of my mind said, yeah, but is it going to be fun for anybody else? But a lot of you seem to like it. So we have a lot more penguins to go. A lot more. I'm thinking that this, with a minimum amount of stage fussing, will probably coincide with a whole year. And then we will have a year of penguins. And then I will call on one of you, or many of you, to make the epic playlist that must result from this year of your Daily Penguin. But over the course of our penguin examinations, we have looked at great books, forgotten books, weird choices on Penguin's part. We saw the Penguin Classic edition of the Magna Carta, for instance, which occupied 25 pages of a 300-page book because Penguin had found a great critical edition to just run alongside with Magna Carta. The reason for that volume was the critical apparatus, because the text itself has no literary value. It is a legal document. It was never written to be read by the general public. It was never written to be for any kind of literary value to be appreciated, any more than were the military dispatches of the Duke of Wellington and such. And that raises lots of questions for me. They're interesting questions. For me, it raises lots of questions about what Penguin's editorial ethos really is. Sometimes some aspects of that strategy are easy. Of course, if you're a reprint house, you want all of Dickens under your heading so that it can go to schools, so that you can cash in on a sure thing. And if you have enough cachet, if you have enough of an imprimatur, like Penguin Classics does, you can start to take chances. I've mentioned that Penguin has taken chances in the last 30 years or so by adding titles to the Penguin Classic line that aren't classics, that aren't, in order for something to be a classic, it has to not only be literary significance or of particular significance in commenting on its time, but it also has to survive time. You cannot call something a classic in its own day. Although plenty of people, myself included, plenty of critics, love to enthuse about a book and sometimes go for the lamentable phrase, an instant modern-day classic, something like that. And you understand that's a product of enthusiasm, but you can't know that about a book. So when Penguin makes these strange editorial choices, the most infamous example being the Memoirs of Morrissey, but there are lots of others. We're going to encounter plenty of other choices in this little tour. You have to wonder what those editorial board meetings are like when they're picking some weird book that is a totally unconventional choice. Oh goodness, what are you doing, baby? Do you want another appearance on camera? Huh? Oh goodness. Somebody's very feisty. Do you want to go out? You want to go for a long walk? That can be arranged. You just have a little patience with your gas bag owner and we will go. Her optimism never dims. Every time we plan our long afternoon walk, she always expects that she's going to have her number one desire, which is to scream at people to stop and pet her. and she coos and turns all around and kisses their nose and kisses their hands, and she doesn't get to do that anymore, and neither do I. I used to do the conversational equivalent of that, and neither one of us does. We're two extroverts trapped in a suddenly introverted world. But she always hopes. But anyway, as I was saying, even when that Penguin editorial choice has them recommending and then reprinting books that are not anyone's definition of a classic, that are just an editorial gamble, there's usually still a reason for it. There's usually still a reason for it. If you want to start printing a living African writer who is in his 70s and is well known and is great, well, you're more or less within your purview to do that if you've got the cash and you think you can make it fly. If you want to print Morrissey's memoirs, you know there'll be a lot of people who'll be interested in it, and also the choice of putting that under the heading of Penguin Classics will also raise interest. It will garner people attention. It will start headlines and whatnot. And even Magna Carta. It's a founding document of English jurisprudence. You could make a case, well, it's a founding document, it should be in our collection, but it doesn't have any literary merit. But we have found a great edition. We found a great scholar who can make a great volume out of Magna Carta, and that is absolutely what happened. The Penguin Classic Magna Carta volume is great. You can't study the work without reading that volume. But our work today, again, it's a foundational literary document or legal document in English history. And again, it has no literary value at all. It wasn't crafted to have any, and no one can read into it that there is any more than you can with Magna Carta. I know there's all sorts of proponents of found literature, but this is not that. You cannot find any literary merit in Magna Carta. You can't find any literary merit in the Penguin we're doing today. And yet Penguin published it anyway, and by now you probably know what I'm talking about. This is not, I believe, a Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition. Although it's this mighty whomping big thing. This is Domesday book in an absolutely gorgeous trade paperback, an enormous trade paperback of Domesday book. William the Conqueror, William the Bastard in 1066, that date that is famous to everyone, conquered England by the sword. It was a random chance of the dice. He might not have succeeded if a very much slightly earlier invasion had not sapped strength and split attention. It was a hair's breadth thing, but it worked. And it won him a kingdom. And he ruled that kingdom, but his main concerns were on the continent. And in 1086, he commissioned a survey. He sent riders to every little shire and bolt hole anywhere in his kingdom to find out who was there, how many, what they owned, how much money they were worth, and how much of what they paid or how much land was around actually belonged to the king. A massive assessment of one island-girded kingdom. An amazing thing for someone to do, to embark on at all, much less to succeed in doing. And he did succeed in doing it. And Domesday book is an incredible source of historical and archaeological information. It talks about buildings that don't exist anymore. It talks about families that don't exist anymore. And it precisely delineates what those families owned and where they lived in brief installments, one after another. And you might be thinking, okay, well, that doesn't sound appetizing to read, but you're going to tell us that this is the same thing as the Magna Carta volume. Magna Carta is also not appetizing to read. I would argue that Morrissey's memoirs are not appetizing to read, but you know what I mean. Magna Carta is a historical document. It's not appetizing to read, but Penguin found a great critical edition, and that's why they printed it. That's why they added it to their line. And that isn't true in this case. That isn't true at all. This is just Domesday book. It has, let me show you here. It has an index, which is very, very helpful. The index starts after the last entry in Domesday book. It has an introduction by G.H. Martin that is that long. That's all. And it has no annotations anywhere through it. So you are 100% completely on your own. You are presented with just the survey that King William commissioned, and that's all. Once upon a time, years and years ago, there was an oversized hardcover edition of Domesday Book that actually did what I'm describing this book does not do, where it went into detail. It wrote the interesting historical details, biographical details, geographical details about many of the entries in this thing. I used to have that volume here at Hyde Cottage. I don't think I have it anymore, but that is the approach that would justify you doing this. And Penguin mysteriously, very obviously, does not take that approach. Instead, this is just... I don't even know. I don't know what this is. This is an unreadable work. This is an unreadable legal text. You don't think there's some sort of metatextuality or found literature here. You cannot get caught up in a land survey. This is an unreadable work. And Penguin printed it in a gorgeous edition, I guess, to just do it, to just have a gorgeous edition. That's all. You're never going to need to reference this at all. If you are one of the 10,000 families in the United Kingdom that want to maybe trace some sort of quasi-legal provenance of your family back to the mists of time, then Domesday Book might be of interest. But you would already have... Those records are online. You would already have referenced them and cross-referenced them without a $30 paperback. And if you're a general reader, you might be interested in Domesday Book if it takes the other approach. A long introduction. Maybe edit the entries so that you don't get all of them and you have room for lots of notes, lots of context, lots of explanatory notes, maybe an essay or two. But instead, no. You just get Domesday Book. That's all. The survey between two covers. That Penguin, I guess, made for posterity? I cannot think of a reason why this book was made. The general interest reader, even historically inclined, is ruled out completely. But schools are also ruled out completely because there's nothing here for a student to grasp onto. Nothing at all. So who else? Who else would there be? I have no idea. Libraries? But why would anyone want this? When any reference to the Southall family or the Clerkenwell family is going to reference their mention in Domesday Book or anywhere else. You're not going to need the other 1,200 pages. So it is on one level an example of the kind of Penguin that I've talked about where I do not understand, where the work itself doesn't have any literary merit. And is just being presented to the reader, I guess, to start a conversation or to show that this line is elastic. Only the thing that has saved previous examples like that has been the critical apparatus that holds them up. And in this case, there isn't one. So this is one of the very few Penguin classics where I can honestly ask, why does this book exist? I'm glad it does. It's a very pretty thing. Although I'm perfectly willing to admit that in the years that I've had this, I've never touched it. Never pulled it down off the shelf. If I were applying to my Penguin wall the same yardstick that I apply to all my other books, this would long since be gone. Because this is in many ways a useless book. A very pretty, very well-designed, useless book. And that confuses me. It still confuses me to this day. In fact, I'd love to hear hypotheses from the rest of you as to why a publisher would do this. This is not a literary text. It's not even readable. Why would they do it? Why would they publish this? I'm curious to this day. I do not have a theory. I do not know one way or another. So, our follow-up to Les Miserables is one of the only books anywhere on my Penguin wall that's actually less readable. I've had a number of emails from a number of you saying that I was too harsh on poor Victor, and that Les Miserables has thrilled you and delighted you and swept you away. I'm not 100% sure in all the cases of all the emails that I've got that the sweeping away didn't happen via the musical first. And I'm not 100% sure that if the musical didn't exist, you would be swept away by the jumble sale that is the book. But I'm happy to hear it either way. I feel fairly confident that I'm not going to get any emails saying, I was swept away by Domesday Book. I laughed, I cried, I will see it more times than cats. But anyway, that's your Penguin for today. A true mystery, a bizarre enigma in the Penguin lineup. A book that cannot be consulted by students and cannot be read for pleasure. And that is not presented as a critical volume for scholars. So why does it exist? I don't know. I have no idea. I fancy that I've done a lot of thinking on Penguin Classics, and I do not have an explanation for this one. So maybe tomorrow we'll be back in comprehensible territory. Wouldn't that be nice? I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.